All right. Welcome back. Let's see. Let's pause real quick because I can't hear this. So hold on one second. Let's go to this screen share for now. All right, back with another live. So today we do have a topic. And for those of you that are joining the live, thank you. For those of you who are watching this at a later point, thanks for checking it out. Let's go into a quick disclaimer. I am not a medical professional, and this is not medical advice. So let's check that off. But there's a lot of cool information that we will talk about going forward. So let's jump in to, well, before we jump into the patent, did you know that Pakalolo was first mentioned in the Hawaiian newspaper in 1842? So here on the Civil Beat website, the Honolulu Civil Beat website, they did an article about Pakalolo's long history in Hawaii. And this was done in 2016, and it goes on to talk about, and right here, in the Hawaiian language newspaper, as far back as 1842. So, cannabis and the islands has a long history with cannabis, and their name for it was numbing tobacco. So, as you can see in this article, it was this is a good article, and I'll put this link up, but just so that you guys can get some more context on this topic that we're talking about, because I know it's a little bit taboo, but we're using this platform to put out better information, because right now there is not as good information, and I think it takes sometimes people to kind of go through it to see what is important, because there's information coming from everywhere. So, but yeah, I just wanted to break it with that and just kind of talk about the initial how the word Pakalolo came about to be. So, but yeah, going back to the patent. And so the patent is important because a lot of people don't recognize the medicinal benefits of cannabis. And whether you believe it or not, the facts are going to be presented here. So we'll go to this. So this is a screen share of the National Library of Medicine, and this is the patent US 6630507-B1 called Cannabinoids as Antioxidants and Neuroprotectants. And it goes on to say when it was requested by WHO, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services in 1998 and granted in 2003. And it goes on to talk about the patent. But yeah, so that and understand, even with these current laws, the transitioning of rescheduling cannabis and even the 2018 Farm Bill, there's this patent that has been around for more than 20 years. So I've actually known about this patent for more than 10 or so years. I've actually used it when talking about this, when I used to go to health food stores and discuss cannabis and CBD and things like that. So I just wanted to bring it to everyone's attention that the patent does exist. You're welcome to look it up for yourself. It is right here. You can print it out. But what does all that mean? Yeah, it's a patent. Yes, it says cannabinoids as antioxidants and neuroprotectants, but it isn't exactly for everyone. Everyone has a different response to it. So we'll kind of get into some of that, but I just want to touch really quick on the patent. All right, kind of going back to cannabis. Well, let's just say, let me find another here, that cannabis and the plant reacts differently with different people. And I would say that it has a lot of misinformation that has been perpetuated over the years. So it's hard for people to get a clear understanding. And that's from your heavy users to your brand new users to your doctors to even, your old school people and all that stuff. So I think there's a lot of consensus, but there's not a lot of clear-cut information. If you take websites like Leafly, they might have a data bank for a strain, but that strain might differ in its effects per person, per type of product, per batch even, per grower, per strain, all that. So there's so much more that I don't want to say needs to be defined, but that there needs to be a better understanding. And it isn't where we need to keep defining it. I think it's to define it less and give it an overall idea of what it can do, but not to say that it has this direct correlation to an effect. So, I definitely want to get way deeper into this subject because it's a heavy subject that needs to be more discussed. And that's one of the reasons why I'm also on this platform, because along this journey, I realized that with all the information out there, there's a lot of mixed messaging. And by us putting out more information collectively together, we can have a better, clear sense of this topic. All right, so going back to cannabis, cannabis is many forms. It's a plant. Obviously, it's also hemp. Hemp is cannabis. The M word, which I choose not to use because of certain contexts. If you understand the propaganda against the plant, you understand why we don't use the M word anymore. That's a whole nother discussion for another day. But going based on the plant, I think there's been a lot of misconceptions, and part of why we're here right now is to help bring more attention to light. So whether you're in the comments now live or you're watching this at a later date, throw a comment in there, throw a question in there. Maybe we can address it going forward, because we do have a plan to move forward with these topics going forward. Maybe not in this format or live, but maybe in a continued format like a podcast or something like that. So stay tuned for more. All right, so next on the list, and we're going to try to power through this because I know everyone doesn't have all the time in the world, but it's nice to put this on and listen to while you're driving. So, that's a good option. And if you are planning to do that, I would suggest YouTube Premium, because you don't have to listen to commercials. And YouTube Premium with the app allows you to play it with your phone screen off, so you don't have to kill your battery. This is not sponsored by YouTube Premium. This is not compensated by YouTube Premium, but I'm just trying to look out because I don't like commercials, and if there's a way to fast forward through them, that's one way. So that's just a little hack there. All right, but getting into the ECS, this is kind of the initial way to kind of break ground on this topic. Yes, cannabis is a hot subject. It's a taboo topic. Not many people are willing to talk about it. Many social media platforms won't promote this type of language, or, and just by doing this live, this might not get to anybody. But it will be recorded, and hopefully somebody will come across this because there is information here. So, but going over the ECS, which is the Endocannabinoid System, and I do have a screen share here. I'm going to share real quick. This is by Harvard Health Publishing. This is in 2021. The Endocannabinoid System, Essential and Mysterious. And there's a quote here that I want to pull up as it shows you this diagram of the CB1 receptors, CB2 receptors, and these are things that we have throughout our bodies. And the quote here, maybe I can highlight it as well. Maybe I can't. All right. The ECS regulates and controls many of our most critical bodily functions, such as learning and memory, emotional processing, sleep, temperature control, pain control, inflammatory and immune responses, and eating. The way that I would explain it is that the endocannabinoid system is very much like like acupuncture points throughout the body that helps to regulate the body from pain, inflammation, temperature, mood, appetite, all these factors that are internal as well as environmental. And so because everybody has an endocannabinoid system, everyone has a different response to cannabinoids. And it's based on a lot of factors. And I think the direct correlation that cannabis gets you high, or cannabis is bad, I think there's a lot of misconceptions there. And then for a lot of friends and family that have that I've had this conversation with, they've now been more open and enlightened to the context of the plant, because the plant gets a bad rap, and that's part of the reason why that's part of the reason why we're on here, not defending the plant, but putting out better information. Because not that I have better information, but I have my own experiences, and I have shared experiences that I've had with others based on in my career path and based on where I've been in this space. So yeah, that's why I feel that it's an important topic to talk about, and it's something that I can help with. So. But yes, so ECS, endocannabinoid system, brain function, immune system, responsible for temperature, mood, appetite, homeostasis, natural balancing. And that's why, like, the same product you use, you might not have or need the same thing or get the same effect, because your body adapts and changes over time. And this is why there's so many misconceptions, and when people are looking for dosage instructions, there's really a list of things that needs to be checked off before you understand dosage, because there's no standard dosage. And if anyone tells you that, I don't feel like they're in position to say that, because nobody understands your background, your history, and even if they did, they're not you, to the point where they would need to know almost every minute or second that's happening in your life, because that's what the endocannabinoid system is doing. It's helping to regulate every minute, every second. The same product on 2 hours sleep can react differently than 4 hours of sleep, and a whole other, down the rabbit hole. But yeah, I want to briefly touch on the endocannabinoid system and its role. But I want to remind people that everybody has an endocannabinoid system. And this endocannabinoid system responds to cannabinoids. And cannabinoids can come in many forms. Mostly cannabinoids, I would say, are going to be cannabis sourced. So cannabinoids and cannabis go together. Your endocannabinoid system works with cannabinoids. And so this is where, this whole thing of cannabis is bad. If cannabis is bad, how does it work with your endocannabinoid system, and why is that bad, right? So this endocannabinoid system that we have, it responds to something. Everyone has a different response, and that's why some people, I don't say they need it, but some people, it complements their situation, and for some it doesn't. But every situation isn't the same, and every situation can change even for the same person. So that's why I think this is a good topic, because there's so many different ways to look at it, so many different ways to think about it. But the idea and the base level of information that we want to provide is that everyone reacts differently based on their previous background and a lot of other factors. But and one thing I don't hear as much people talking about is diet, sleep, and dehydration. And as a cannabis patient, medical cannabis patient, I've talked to many, many people, doctors included, and this whole idea that cannabis gets you high is there's no base for it, because for some people, cannabis grounds them. For someone like myself who gets motion sickness easy, and cannabis helps me to balance better. So for everybody that's saying that, cannabis gets you high, I think there can be an equal or greater argument for cannabis helping someone to balance and gain a grounding. And I know that sounds weird, but that's just coming from my own personal perspective. Again, the disclaimer is I'm not a doctor. This is not medical advice, and this is my own personal opinion. So, but there's a lot of information out there for people to research. If you're interested in more information or on a specific topic, put it in the comments, or, find a way to contact me. But, going forward, I think there's a lot of information that we want to start to uncover. And this is just the very initial basis, right? So the patent, what his cannabis is a plant, comes in many different forms. Well, it comes in many different forms after you process it. It only comes in basically two forms while the plant is alive, and that's male and female plant. Even a autoflower plant is still a female plant. So, and the male plant produces pollen, and it doesn't produce any flower itself. So we'll go to this NDI real quick. I can show you. So what you're seeing right now is the female plant, which does not produce any seeds unless you cross-pollinate it, or it's a hermaphrodite plant, which if it's a hermy plant and it starts to seed, then you have less flower. And so a lot of times people that are growing a lot of flower, they don't want anything that's going to reduce the production of flower, right? So that's seeds and male plants. All right, so with the endocannabinoid system, what responds to cannabinoids, what responds to your endocannabinoid system is cannabinoids. And cannabinoids can come in many forms and ratios. The first couple cannabinoids I'll read off that most people know is like CBD. CBD is some people say that CBD is a non-psychoactive cannabinoid. And I can almost bet on it that everybody that has said that has never tried a CBD dab before, or CBD RSO. CBD concentrate, because I have, and I would say that CBD does give you a change of mindset. And if we're gonna go kind of like real technical, if you look up the definition of psychoactive, it's when you have a mindset change, and you can get that from a good call, like you won the lottery, or a bad call, someone passed away. So I think a lot of times we think psychoactive as like you start seeing things. And I think that's not exactly entirely true. I think you can have a mindset change from too much caffeine or too much tobacco. So, I think a lot of times we like to really make these general statements, but they don't hold true. And if we continue to perpetuate these general statements, then we're just feeding into the BS. And I think there's a quote that says the BS stops here. Right. So that's one of the reasons why, this journey and path to go live, or to even be in position to have these conversations like we're having right now. It's I don't say gradual step, but, for me, it's been voicing my thoughts and feelings and opinions out in different ways. I've, testified on these subjects. I was in an informational briefing at the Capitol, and that was all in 2025. Here, let me do a screen share real quick. So, there's more conversations to be had, and unfortunately right now where the conversation is, it's there's more people coming out to talk about it, which is good, but there's still a lot of bad information out there. And so I feel like if you know better, you do better. So this is me trying to do my part and help out in a way, right? So but yeah, here right now you're seeing a screen share. We're using the Ecamm software. I'm actually showing a video that I did. So I'm screen sharing YouTube, and this is a informational briefing that I did at the Hawaii State Capitol in January 2025. I got asked by one of the legislators to put this together because it provides a lot of good context for where we are and where we can be going. So, I want to thank the legislators and lawmakers for allowing me to jump in at the Capitol for this informational briefing and provide better context. If you do want to watch this, let me know. I'll have the link in, or it should be on my YouTube page as well. So, all right. So getting back to this whole list of things we have. We talked about the patent. We talked about cannabis, also considered hemp. Also, people call it the M word, which I think people call it the M word to make it sound more illicit. And, I think that's the whole point, is they're trying to make it to be more ethnically charged. It's an ethnically charged word. If you guys look up the history of the M word, hopefully you guys stop using it. But yes, we talked about cannabis, hemp included, the endocannabinoid system, cannabinoids that respond to your endocannabinoid system. So cannabinoids like CBD, THC. There's a few other. There's a lot more. But the one thing to note is that a cannabinoid preheated, before it's heated to the point where the cannabinoid is activated, is usually THCA or CBDA. And the A is for acidic because it's not heated yet, so it's not converted yet. So under the 2018 Farm Bill, when the government tried to define hemp by saying that hemp is considered as under 0.3% THC, which the natural flower and hash even are considered hemp by those guidelines, because the flower itself because it's not heated to the point where the THC or CBD is activated, it's usually THCA. And this is where the 2018 Farm Bill really hits on the point. Because by definition, and if you go by the government's definition of the 2018 Farm Bill, the government's trying to define Mother Nature. And by making a definition, they've crossed the line to say that this is what we're defining as hemp. So this is where the flower that you're seeing can be considered hemp in the government's definition, because in the current form, not heated, when it's not burnt yet, it's still in the acidic form. And so even your test formula, there's a preheated and after heated, and after heated is when you're decarbing it. So when your after heated formula is your THCA times 0.877 plus your THC available. And so for most of the certificate of analysis that you'll see, it will have both the THCA number and the after decarb THC percentage. And so this is what gets a lot of people confused, and even gets the government confused, because the government is really trying to, define Mother Nature and then put all these different barriers and basically Prohibition 3.0. The better thing to do is to understand it as a collective and move forward, right? Not creating prohibition, which puts people into shady places and puts them in harm's way. So, but yeah, we're going to get a lot deeper into that subject at some point. But I did want to explain the difference in the 2018 Farm Bill and how THCA is legal in the 2018 Farm Bill definition. And by that definition, products can satisfy that 2018 Farm Bill because the product is not heated yet. And that's why, when the formula changes, when they say, well, it's after heated, well, then you've altered the definition of the 2018 Farm Bill. And if someone were to take the raw flour and in a test, if they heat it in any way, they've also altered the product. So it's not in its original form. And that is a huge point, because that would really kind of separate the, I won't say the illicit use, but that's what they're trying to get at, right? Which is unfortunate, because we need better understanding instead of prohibition. So anyway, that was about cannabinoids, and then the next thing is terpenes. So I'm going to get into terpenes. So terpenes are the smell, taste, and flavor that the plant provides. And the terpenes smell, taste, and flavor, it also has an effect with the person's personal history and background. And this is why, what's good for one person isn't good for another person, because everyone has a different sensitivity to flavor, smell, and taste. Everyone's palate is differently. People grew up with different foods. Some people like sour. Some people like sweet. Some people like salty. And even the flower batch can change based on harvest time, cure time, nutrients, environment. There's so many factors which can alter the end product. Just even, that's why every batch is different. And this is why you'll never see the same number usually on any two batches, because every batch is different. And we're talking into the points, right? 29.81, 27.67, because these are random samples, batch samples. Every nug is going to be a different percentage, which is why they get a initial batch test, right? So, but every batch test could be different based on the cure time. So there's so many other factors that equate to the numbers, And that's why numbers aren't exactly everything to look at. Terpene percentage, which isn't really too much on products these days, but terpene percentage, harvest date. Terpene percentage also might fade and change over time because the product might dry out. But terpene percentage will allow you to realize how, I'll say juicy, but how tasty a product can be. But if the terpene percentage is from 5 months ago, then, how does that number hold up, right? So there's a lot of factors that go into these numbers, but I think the initial idea before people start spinning is that everyone has a different response, and you could have a different response to the same product at a different time of day. And this is where the environmental factors around you, diet, sleep, dehydration, the things that you're going through, your palate even. If you like I don't really like sweet things too much, but if you like sweet things and that strain is sweet, then it might resonate, right? But just because that batch strain, it was sweet, doesn't mean the same batch and the same strain is going to be the same flavor, taste, and cannabinoid profile, right? And I think that's where things go, I'll say wrong, but things go, maybe not, maybe weird is the example, but things go different because every batch is different. The cannabinoid profile, some might have more CBD based on the lighting or whatever not. And again, it's a random test of a handful of nugs. So, every nug, if you test every nug, it's going to be a different number. And that's why I think people get really confused and people try to number hunt. But I've had terpenes that stand out to me that tasted like maybe like grapefruit, that was just an overall pleasant flavor that it enhanced the overall experience. And this is where going back to why palate, why your own personal background and history play more an important role than any words on the label, any suggestion that someone gives you, and any of these suggested effects. You need to throw them out the door. And anybody pushing suggested effects, I hate to say it, but in this day and age, you're wrong. And this is where, because I've been in the space for so long and I've seen so many people do detrimental things for the community while they're in the industry because they're perpetuating it. And that's probably 95% of the legal producers that contribute to this propaganda. And the reason why is because when they try to classify the plant into the effect category, and nobody can tell you the effects. And that's why, with more information on cannabinoid profile, terpene profile, harvest date, how fresh it is, and then reminding people that everyone has a different response. So there's so many other factors besides like the three things that people say. And I don't even want to say it because I don't want to even bring it up because I don't want to perpetuate it, but it needs to stop. And I made this choice a few years ago to stop using these words, and I've left them behind. When you make a New Year's resolution, I was like, yes, I'm going to leave these three things behind. And it has helped me when I was managing a dispensary, and it helped people to focus on more important factors than suggested effects. And more important factors could be lineage. If you like a certain strain, maybe you follow it, but usually if you follow a certain strain and the lineage, it's because you like the taste, flavor, and effect. And so that's where this whole thing of classifying before somebody pre-classifying into this sativa indica hybrid categories. And when those things translate from flower to concentrate to edible, it gets people all jacked up. And I think that's why we're here to spread better information. So, but shots fired, because if you're in 2025 and 2026, if you still have sativa, indica, and hybrid on your menu, on your product, and you're still using these words, I'm sorry, but you are outdated and you're not using better information and you're not listening to the community, because the community, if you listen, they're gonna say something that might be completely opposite. So, but yeah, that is how terpenes can affect your overall experience. And so I also talked about how your past experience can lead to a correlation to your current experience. And one of the stories I can say is, if you as a kid had oranges thrown at your head when you were a kid, so maybe oranges is a trigger for you. And when you use this strain in dab or in vape or in whatever kind of form, maybe the smell of the orange strain triggers that, that PTSD. And I've heard veterans have this kind of effect. So that's why, like, what's good for one person might not be good for another person, but the same strain in a different format might react differently, right? And I've heard medical professionals talking to how, a dab is equal to 2 joints, and I would say that we need to stop trying to draw correlations and trying to compare things, because each product is going to be used in its own way. And I feel once we start to compare them and try to, then it's really confusing for people, because maybe, for one person, a dab is like a couple joints, but maybe for another person, a couple joints is heavier than dab. So without us making these fine lines and letting people, giving them enough information so that they can experience on their own, I think that is the best way moving forward. So yeah, we need to leave this old terminology behind. This whole reefer madness, it's crazy at this point, with cannabis, being rescheduled and should be descheduled, right? That's why, this whole patent is a good example of why it does have medicinal benefits for some people, right? So, all right. So going forward, I know this is kind of a hot topic, and on this kind of platform, it isn't probably discussed enough. So that's why we're using this time and space to try to, provide better information and to put this out there to see who else might be looking for this, and who else also might need to hear this, and also enjoy hearing this. So yeah, I'm super excited to kind of keep this conversation going, but I'm not going to talk your ear off all day, all night long on this. We're going to make another attempt at this. Maybe it won't be a live, maybe it'll be a podcast coming soon. So, stay up on everything I got going on my IG. Same name as this one as you're watching it right now. It's where I kind of put some of the updates. I'm slowly going to try to transition more of the short form content onto YouTube. Right now, I'm just going through and testing out this different long form content and seeing how that resonates. But, going forward, I have an idea of, I think, what we can do to continue this conversation going forward. So, but yeah, I want to thank you guys for stopping in. I'm super excited to kind of get deeper into this and see what you guys think. I know we kind of touched on a lot of different things, but hopefully you enjoyed this conversation, and, you look forward to the next one. So thank you guys. Oh, and I'll put the links in the description so you guys can check it out. The informational briefing, the Civil Beat article. If you want the Harvard thing, let me know. I can send that to you too as well. But thank you for checking us out.